I'm going to talk about a world that I know very well. Herb described me as a hardware hacker. That's a good description. I'm also a designer, and I'm trained as a designer. And one thing that my business and the people around it have tried to do is to merge three concepts that are difficult to kind of bring together. One is creativity, the other one is commerce, and the third one is open source. So hopefully I'll talk a little bit about those things and they can make sense to you. So I run a company called Tinker.it. We are based in London and in Milan, in Italy. And we do all sorts of very strange projects, mostly around interactive products, spaces, and events. This is something we've just finished this weekend for the new Nokia N900, which is a sort of Linux box, if you will, in the world of phones. And we hacked and built projects around old 80s products and devices. So this is a speak and spell, for example, that's been rethought with the N900. If you're bored, go and see our website while I'm presenting. This is also part of that project. I started the company in 2007 with a man called Massimo Banzi. The reason why this is important is Massimo is part of this group of people who created and co-founded the Arduino platform. Who here knows about Arduino, has heard about Arduino? That's not too bad. Okay. The Arduino platform is this little piece of gear, piece of hardware. Classically, pieces like that you only see inside the boxes we have, the computers we have, the cell phones we have, etc. One might describe the Arduino as an open source hardware hacking platform for artists, designers, and hobbyists. Another way to describe it that's much simpler is how to learn about electronics in a cheap and easy way. This is a platform that was created to cost as little as possible. It was designed inside an academic context in the Piemonte Mountains in Italy in 2005. And now it is sold around the world in 28 different countries. They've sold more than 60,000 units. And I would say probably at this point we're getting close to 100,000 units. And it is manufactured and distributed in Italy. So I'm going to come back to this term, hobbyists, designers, and artists. These are three groups of people who don't usually talk to each other very much. They have different goals, they have different aspirations, and they work in very different ways. And they can influence how we see innovation in dramatically different ways as well. So let's start by hobbyists. Hobbyists might be someone who, and hobbyists in the world of Arduino might be someone who has studied electronics engineering when they were a young person and then moved on to do computer science and then decided to become a sysadmin and have been doing that for the past 20 years. A hobbyist might be someone who used to open up their cars when you used to be able to open up a car and see anything of value. And it's entirely a person who's motivated by ideas, but who's also limited by the time that they have. They usually have a day job that doesn't include electronics at all. And they do this on weekends, occasionally, when the wife is away and the kids are not there, or the husband is away. They might read Make magazine, and they might look at the website, but for them it's about sort of what they feel compelled to do and how they feel compelled to work. And they really like fixing things. So in the world of Arduino, if a hobbyist buys an Arduino platform, this is something that they might make. Not Twitter. Let's see. I'll stop here. You know, so you see an Arduino platform, so one of those little chips. This is connected to via USB to your computer, very easy to install. All the software is free and it's downloadable. And this is basically a type of project you can put together over a weekend very easily, if not half a day. And, you know, very rough. You might share the code online, you might not. This is kind of shot probably with a cell phone or a camera. It's sort of, you know, it's what it is, and it makes that person extremely happy, and they can share it with their family. So the motivations here are really about, I want to get something done really quickly, and suddenly I can post this up online. And if you Google for Arduino and theremin, you will find thousands of versions of theremins. So sort of reinventing the wheel perhaps, but with different tools that are far cheaper than what a theremin used to cost. Then you have the designers. And in the designers, I'm sort of encapsulating also commerce, marketing, and business in general. The motivation here to use a platform like Arduino might be one of budget. I don't have an R&D department. I need to get a prototype done for a client. It needs to happen fast. We don't have time to screw around. And I need to have access to a community of information and of knowledge that I don't have internally. I don't have any electrical engineers or electronics engineers, and I just want to get something done. And I want the right tool for the right job. How that project happens, how that project takes place, then is of a completely different nature, and the outcome is also very different. So again, if we look at the context of music, because I thought I would try to, beat Mike at his own game. We have this project by Daniel Hirschman. This is from 2006, so this is quite old now, but was made for the Pompidou Center in Paris. I hope you can see this a little bit. So this was a permanent installation for several weeks where little motors would hit on these notes every time you went down the stairs. So here, the outcome is, of course, a public installation. This is permanent. This has to be very much dummy-proof. This has to work consistently. And this engages people with what is essentially a deconstructed piano in a completely new, in a completely different way. And this has money behind it. There's an institution that decided they wanted to commission a piece of work. And this was made using an Arduino. So all the documentation for that project, Daniel has documented online. So the motivations are different, but the outcome uses the same tool. And this is a tool that people are starting to care to talk about. And then you have the world of artists, so hobbyists, designers, artists. In the art world, the motivations change slightly. We've worked with a lot of artists in a lot of different contexts. The conversation becomes about, well, I need to apply for funding, and I have X budget for materials. I need to just get this done. I need to commission someone to do it for me. The art world has a love and hate relationship with commerce generally, but does depend on funding to happen and money to be there for their pieces to be made. So they like the Arduino because the ethical values behind open source, the fact that the platform is cheap, is accessible, makes their job easier, makes the art happen. This is not a particularly good example, but I thought it was an interesting one nonetheless, which is, again, to do with music. This was, I love the internet. This was qualified as the best use of Arduino on the internet because someone made a list of the 40 top Arduino uses for Arduino. So here, you're motivated by the idea, you're motivated by the ability to actually get something going that is publicly presentable. I would challenge you at this point in 2009 to go into any gallery that has a kinetic installation or something that's interactive. Look for the Arduino. There is usually one hidden in a box somewhere. That's what I have now started doing, which is a bit creepy, I guess. I'm not even looking at the thing. I'm kind of like, where's the Arduino? So what's interesting is not only that the Arduino has been able to reach those 3 areas of interest, but also that other areas are starting to get interested. So obviously education, how we teach science, how we teach technology to primary schools, secondary schools, etc., will change because of platforms like this. What happens when your teaching materials are essentially published online because there's such a huge community of people sharing information about how they use that platform? How does that change how we teach? There is a large group right now that's interested in open source schools. And there is a group in the UK that only deals with open source schools. And they're interested in Arduino and integrating Arduino into national curriculum, etc. The world of technology, how we do engineering, how engineering happens, how big companies can innovate really quickly, really cheaply, they're starting to get interested. We have the world of science as well. How can you do science on the cheap? Can you stop depending on buying machines that cost thousands of pounds and go back to a platform that costs 20? That, yes, you have to invest a little bit of time into building the materials you need to use with that platform, but it's there and it's sold around the world and it's not proprietary, it's open source. You can develop it as you wish. Obviously, the world of marketing has also sort of latched onto this. Recently, someone made a synthesizer, again with the theme of music, made a synthesizer using very, let's say, not quite naked women in the video. It was for a music video. I decided not to show that one because it's just not that great. The world of research and pure research is also using Arduino as a platform that is cheap, accessible, and also just gets the job done. And also the world of politics. There's a group called Sidekick Studios in London that has now put a robot into Parliament so that the robot could spell out and write out what young people thought would be good things to develop for the government. So ideas about where the government should invest money for young people. And they've done that through using a robot. So some of the motivations for these groups of people are the same. They want to get something done quickly and cheaply. But there's also the entire conversation around what does it mean to innovate? What does it mean to operate with those platforms? Those platforms now mean that you don't necessarily have to be a specialist at anything. You can pick up knowledge and you can develop knowledge based on what other people have done, based on what you see, based on what you can copy-paste quickly. Basically, getting started with an Arduino takes about 2 days, and then it's entirely up to what you want to do. And I would again challenge you to Google whatever is your current problem at the moment and see if someone has tried to solve that problem with an Arduino. It might be something to do with energy monitoring. It might be something to do with sustainability, with reactive surfaces in architecture, with cheap cars. People will have tried. And the open source side contributes to that conversation tremendously because we're now able to share knowledge. The community accepts that that is the way to go. The trend is around open source. Open source software has been proven, and open source hardware is now starting to also prove itself to a wider community, not just the hobbyists, designers, and artists, but a community at large. One of the first people to start making their own Arduino when the project was started in 2005 were schools in Chile, because they couldn't afford to have an Arduino shipped over. So they just started making their own. All the files were open, everything was open, and now there are, I would say, about 10 different versions of Arduino that people have made and are distributing and are selling in their own markets, in their own countries, for their own purposes. An Arduino for wearable computing, an Arduino that's much smaller, an Arduino that's much cheaper. You know, you name it, it's starting to happen now. Being open source also means that you can communicate your ideas in a very open way, and whatever innovation you're actually working on right now, you can share with others and benefit from that knowledge exchange. And I think ultimately what we're trying to build, and what businesses like myself, or my business, and others around me are trying to build, is an amount of understanding and a level of education that everybody can have around a certain conversation. In the same way that we're now more or less familiar with HTML. We don't necessarily all know how to write HTML, but we've seen it, we know what it means, we've seen enough pages on the internet to sort of get a sense of what it is. If we see Arduinos once in a while, then we get a sense of what they can do, what they can't do, and how we can be creative with them. And we're trying to fill in the gap between the technophiles and the technophobes. And it's also, it speaks to a broader sense of innovation. How do we perceive innovation as an activity, as a financial activity? Either closed versus open. I think that open innovation is something that we should try to build into business a lot more. And we should try to add value not in closing off ideas, but in sharing those ideas and actually implementing and putting action into those ideas. Because having an idea is great, but it's what you do with it, it's how you implement it, and how you bring it out into larger markets. I really like this article. This was published by the BBC a few months ago, and it was an article that says, you know, are we becoming a nation of programmers? Should we encourage young people to learn about programming at a very early age, because it is becoming so intrinsic to a lot of the relationships that we have with the internet, for example. I would push that forward and say yes, and it also will allow us to innovate with platforms like Arduino in ways that people had never thought of, because people will do problem solving on their own, will stop depending on large economies of scale, large markets that might or might not survive whatever crash happens at whatever time, and be able to be empowered with knowledge and with ability that they would not have gotten in a very industrial top-down system. And this is also, this says a lot about the expectations that we have around education, about young people, about how we communicate knowledge around technology. This is a blog called ArduinoFun.com, and this is run and written by a man in his 40s and his son, who is, I think, 8 years old. And they live in the US, and they write about their projects, and they document their projects online. This acts as a way for them to communicate around projects and around things that perhaps, you know, back in the days was whatever, fixing the car, or whatever it was, building rally cars, etc. Now it's a new language, and it's a new social glue for people. And maybe what we're building are these sort of what one of my favorite authors qualifies as the barbarians, i.e. A hybrid between people who are, or a certain set of communities who are hyper-connected and hyper-informed, and, you know, my generation who are perhaps not that connected, and we're never digital natives, as I'm not that young. Thank you very much for your time. I do hope that you have some questions, and please grab me at the break or otherwise.